All right, welcome to another live episode of geekoutdoors.com. Today we got some interesting topics going back to the news. So first off, we're going to be talking about Microsoft's SQL Server on Linux. Secondly, after that, we're going to be talking about Netflix and how their second quarter earnings is just showing how much they dominate. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about Nintendo's Switch online service for their upcoming game Splatoon 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into it, starting with Microsoft SQL Server being available on Linux. This is the first release candidate. Now, if you are not familiar with what Microsoft SQL Server is, this is basically their database service. Okay, so this is their database program. If you are using Microsoft Office, then you're probably familiar or know of Microsoft Access, which is their built-in database-like service. Just imagine Microsoft SQL Server like at a much higher level. This is their enterprise level stuff. Now, you could also download Microsoft SQL Server free to use on your personal computer, but a lot of companies and businesses use Microsoft SQL Server. Now, why this is big is because it's coming to Linux. That's a huge thing. You know, and last year, if you remember, Microsoft officially joined the Linux Foundation, you know, and honestly, I never thought it would happen in my lifetime. I knew at some point Microsoft was going to be involved with Linux because, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but Microsoft offering SQL Server for Linux, it's pretty big. Rose, hey, what's going on? Hello, Geek. How's it going, Rose? Thanks for joining. And you know, with Microsoft offering SQL Server in the database realm, normally within the whole database realm, if you are thinking about a Linux, you're normally thinking about the whole LAMP architecture, okay, which is Linux as your operating system, of course, Apache, which is your web server, MySQL DB, which is your database, and MySQL DB, I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then P for Python for your programming language. So that's normally the architecture for most people who are doing a complete Linux setup. So they're normally using an open source database, you know, for their actual host system. You know, normally it has been MySQL in the past, MySQL DB, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So with Microsoft offering SQL Server here, it's going to be really different. Wow, I never would have thought that SQL Server would be available on Linux. Of course, if you didn't know, I used to be a DBA myself, and DBA stands for Database Administrator. And so when I started my whole IT career, I was a Oracle Database Administrator. But nowadays, if you ask me to do it, I couldn't do it. I was actually a pretty horrible database administrator. And so let's see what the official thing that they're talking about. So this is the very first version. This is the release candidate before they make it publicly available officially. It's going to support, okay, SQL Server 2017. It will support Docker containers. Now, let me see what else it does seem like it is going to be offering definitely faster performance. Hey, Lance, what's going on? Viper29 Gaming, hey, what's going on? Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. Right now I'm talking about Microsoft SQL Server 2017 being available in Linux. And their early adopter, there's a company, it's called DV01. They're an early adopter, and they are saying that they began using this SQL Server 2017, and so far it's gotten them 15 times faster performance than an open source database, which is, you know, pretty good, as a matter of fact. And what else is they're saying? They're saying that at least for this version on Linux, they are going to be offering additional services. Let me look and see. Okay, so Microsoft is really touting a few things with SQL Server, and especially on Linux, because, and I'll go into the reasons why and how this involves everything else that Microsoft is doing as well. But Microsoft is really touting performance and stability. Okay, that's the primary thing that they are actually talking about. Okay, and also if SQL Server is available and a lot of the Linux community will adopt it, and I think they will, then it'll actually give a more presence against other companies like Oracle, which is a juggernaut in the database world. That's what they're known for. Now let me see if there's anything else that's here that's Linux specific for SQL Server. I don't really think there's anything much more than that in terms of what it's providing. And so you can go and download this. If you look up SQL Server for Linux, you could actually download this for free to try it out. And of course, at some point, you're going to have to get the enterprise version or standard version, i.e. you're going to have to pay for it. And typically for SQL Server, for the standard license, because it is going to be licensed, it starts at $3,277. And you need it like the enterprise level, it's going to be like around 14, I'm sorry. So for the standard edition, it is $931. And then if you want a volume licensing, it's $3,717 per core. So this is more for servers. And then enterprise, $14,256 per core. And so SQL Server is really meant for enterprise level for servers, okay? And hence SQL Server. Now, how or why is this actually happening? Okay, let me field some questions really quick. Viper29, okay. Oh, cool. Okay, so he's talking about his gaming stuff. Lance, hey go, if you can, when you get a moment, can you tell me if I need to disable secure boot on newest motherboard to install Linux Mint? From what I remember, Lance, and we might get into these other questions later, but Linux Mint should already work with UEFI type systems, okay? And I myself, I did turn off secure boot on my motherboard. Okay, so maybe you want to try it out both ways, because honestly, I already turned it off at the beginning. Okay, so you might want to try it out, but that's what I did on mine. I actually turned off my secure boot on my motherboard. Okay, I hope that answers that. Rose says, I know nothing about Microsoft SQL Server Linux. I thought SQL is a programming language. Yes, Rose, SQL is a programming language, or actually it's meant primarily for databases. So it's a structured query language. That's what it is. It's meant to do queries on databases. And so obviously SQL Server is, structured query language for servers, so that's the name that they had. But yeah, it is a language. It's primarily a query language. But you can do a lot with it, I haven't done it in a long time. I'm not going to lie to you. But back then when I was in the IT, when I was at Oracle DBA, I did some development. We used SQL. We also used POSQL as well. And shell scripting, of course, but that's in a whole different category. But I couldn't, honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, I couldn't do any of that today. It's been so long since I've done that. So I could still do simple queries, of course, but not for really complex stuff. So Viper29, I have an MSI motherboard, and Mint install is great with it on off. Great, thank you, Viper29. SQL is a database system, yes. I tried doing SQL in college, LO, yeah, I got it right out. Thanks, Viper, go. I'm sorry it was off topic for you. No problem, no problem. Okay, so going back to this SQL Server, and so, why is Microsoft doing this? Okay, why are they offering SQL Server in Linux? Well, this is part of their whole strategy. Like I mentioned earlier, when Microsoft officially joined the Linux Foundation, and Microsoft, we've discussed Microsoft a lot. Normally it's Microsoft or Apple or both. A lot of people don't agree with their business practices, and I definitely don't agree with all of their business practices. But one thing that you do have to acknowledge is the fact that they're a very, very smart and savvy company when it comes to business. Because majority of times on the news we hear about Apple, Android, but you don't hear too much about Microsoft except for normally bad news, right? But if you look at their earnings, they're making billions and billions of dollars. They know how to make money, just plain and simple. They're not a stupid company. And so what they're doing here is they're actually maneuvering, okay? So let's take the example of when Microsoft actually tried to get into the mobile space. Actually, they were there way before Android or Apple ever got on the scene. If you remember, back in the day, Windows did have something called Windows CE. Okay, so that was like the introduction of offering a mobile version of their operating system on mobile devices. Okay, so they were there when Palm was there, when BlackBerry was there. So they were actually around way longer than either Apple or Android. However, whenever Apple came on the scene and they introduced a mobile operating system in a far different way than Microsoft did, because Microsoft is very, very business focused. And so a lot of what they did in the mobile space, similar to what BlackBerry did, similar to what Palm did, it was very business centric. It was not very consumer friendly, okay? And as a matter of fact, a lot of their Windows CE devices, they were made not only for like business professionals, but they were used in like if you were doing inventory management, okay, or POS systems, you know, point of service systems. That's where Windows CE thrived, okay, back then. And whenever Apple came into the scene and they really made mobile operating systems popular for the consumers, and then when Android came in, completely changed the landscape. And as you know, we saw how Windows Mobile went. It actually went horrible, and you know, they're pretty much non-existent in the market. But Microsoft, being smart, they recognized that. And so instead of trying to spend more money in the mobile space, obviously they bought Nokia, but they really bought them for the patents. Instead, they started offering more Microsoft services in both the Apple iOS and Android platform. So smart. And now, similarly, right? Why did they join the Linux Foundation, and why are they offering Microsoft SQL Server on Linux? Why are they offering Microsoft Azure, their cloud services? They actually have Linux compatible systems. I think they even have Linux services there as well. I can't remember, or virtualization for Linux, if I remember correctly. They're getting into the whole Linux space. Well, because once again, Microsoft recognizes what's happening in the real business world. More and more people are using Linux. More and more businesses are using Linux. That is the most important thing. You know, their consumer space is important, but honestly, a lot of their money, and this is with most companies, most of their money is made in businesses and government institutions. Okay, and so they knew that Linux was not going to slow down anytime soon, specifically in the server space, you know, and also in the mobile space with Android, right? And so knowing those things, instead of trying to continually beat these companies by creating their own platform, it's better that they would just, once again, introduce themselves into these platforms by slowly but surely offering Microsoft-related services and products within these platforms. And so you can think of it as like the Trojan horse. Okay, Microsoft is coming in, and initially a lot of people actually hate Microsoft, right? But you're using their services all the time, period. And now that they're getting into Android, Apple, Linux, Apple, you know, Microsoft's everywhere. So you could be using their services and you don't even know it. And so that's really why they're introducing SQL Server. They're not doing it, in my opinion, just like what they did with the Linux Foundation, just like what they did with their Azure cloud services. They're not doing it because they love Linux. Of course not. You know, if they could have destroyed Linux, and they've tried many years, they would have. But knowing what's happening in the real business world, they're maneuvering and adapting. Now, if you are the type of person who already uses databases, you know, and especially if you're Linux, right, you're probably using an open source database, okay? Now, before, as I mentioned earlier, the standard for open source database was MySQLDB, and that's part of the whole LAMP architecture. But Oracle, that's so funny that we're talking about databases and this is all related. Oracle bought MySQLDB at the time, and they did the same thing with OpenOffice. And whenever Oracle came in, the open source community went that way. And I don't blame them, you know, and they wanted to, and I've said this before, I definitely do not mind paying for software and services if it gives people value, okay? But how they maintain it, like their business practices, that's what I don't like. And I did not like the business practices that Oracle had whenever they bought OpenOffice, whenever they bought MySQLDB, right? And whenever they bought Sun Java, right? That basically they own Java or portions of it, you know, and they had that whole legal fight with Google. And so I didn't like those business practices, and neither did the open source community. And so if you remember what happened with OpenOffice is that they forked it, and now we have LibreOffice, which is what's in all of our Linux distro. Thankfully, you know, I don't want to be tied to Oracle behind it. And then similarly for MySQLDB, MySQLDB, the Oracle actually donated it to the Apache Foundation, so now it's Apache OpenOffice. But I think a lot of people have, I'm sorry, yeah, Apache OpenOffice. But MySQLDB, I think it wasn't it Apache? MySQLDB was, okay, maybe I was wrong with that. Okay, so MySQLDB is still owned by Oracle. That's right, I'm sorry, I got that confused. MySQLDB is still owned by Oracle, but OpenOffice, Oracle donated that to Apache, so now it's Apache OpenOffice. So the original founders of MySQLDB actually have their own version, and that is MariaDB. You know, and there are other open source database systems available. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I do remember using MySQLDB, and I did try MariaDB a long time ago whenever this whole fork thing happening, and it's pretty sweet, you know, and I really don't deal with databases much anymore. Yeah, so Rose says, I use Apache open source on my dual boot Windows XP hard drive. Yes, exactly, you know, and so that's kind of what happened there with the whole open source database community. If I had to do it now, if I were to build a whole system and have a database backend, I'm definitely going to use MariaDB. You know, MySQL is still very popular as well. But, you know, once again, Microsoft saw what was happening. They saw an opportunity. And who knows what's going to happen out of this, okay? And Lance says, I use MySQL with my SAM broadcaster installation. Sweet. So Lance, let me ask a question. So MySQL, do you enjoy using it? You know, you can answer that if you like, because I remember it was really cool. And then at the same time, you know, working on Oracle at the time on my day job, it was nice to come back home, and then you would have MySQL there, and it was powerful. It's extremely powerful, you know. And so anyway, so whenever Microsoft gets more traction on all these services, all these products, you're going to see more and more of Microsoft integrated into the open source community. You know, now some people who are really staunchly open source, they're absolutely opposed to this. But honestly, there's really not much you can do about it, because if you think about it, if you look at all the services that we have, there isn't like one type of service. You know, you're sharing so many different services and programs. Some are open source, some are proprietary. It's kind of like the nature of the business, just period. You know, if you think about all the different services that you're using on your mobile device, on your computers, you're probably not using everything proprietary or everything open source. It's a mixture. And so as Microsoft becomes more embedded into the whole open source community, especially Linux, for myself, I'm going to be more wary of things, you know, like if there's similar to what I think about business practices of companies, I also look at the software that I have as well. Of course, as I always said, if it does provide value and I enjoy using it, I'm going to use it regardless. But knowing the business practices, say of like Microsoft or Oracle or even Apple or even Google, right? If they're integrating this into my Linux operating system or other open source services, that I'm really going to pay more attention to that. So in my opinion, I suggest you would do the same if open source projects are very important to you. So know that these things are coming. They're not going to stop. You'll probably see more collaborations between Microsoft and the Linux Foundation, or Microsoft and open source services. There's no way around it. You're going to see more of it. And so just kind of be wary on it. So let me see if there's any other SAM broadcasts. I've never used it too. So Lance is saying, it's not something I think about from day to day. It just works. I haven't had much interaction with it. Yeah, that's kind of the same way that I felt, Lance. If you're not doing really, you know, you're not using your databases on a regular basis, especially for like business stuff, like for example, if you had like an inventory management system that constantly had to be updated and stuff, then you know you're not going to be using it much, you know, if you're doing like enterprise level stuff. But it's awesome that we still have open source alternatives, okay, whether it's MySQL or MariaDB. So that's the first part of the news. Microsoft officially announces the first release candidate for SQL Server 2017. I'm not going to try it myself. You know, I mean, I don't really do much with databases anymore. But if you are a system administrator, or you are a DBA, these are something that might definitely be you might be interested in as well. So moving on to the second point, the second news that we have. Netflix just recently announced their second quarter earnings, and man, they knocked it out of the park. But there are some issues with it. So if you didn't know, Netflix, when they announced their second quarterly earnings, what was the big news was that they actually increased their subscriber growth for second quarter by 5.2 million. Now they actually have a worldwide subscriber number of over 100 million users. And what's also important there is that this is the first time that their international installed base is actually larger than their US base. And if I remember correctly, the international installed base is now at 52.3 million subscribers versus the domestic, the US, which is 51.9 million subscribers. And that is huge. That's up by like 1.1 million versus the last quarter. And so what this happened was this actually sent their stock share prices up. It will, at the time that they announced this earlier in the week, it's $166 a share. Now it's at $188 a share. And so their valuation is now at $80 billion, you know, so that's pretty huge. But all is not rosy in the Netflix world. I absolutely love Netflix. I remember when Netflix first came out in 1997 offering DVD deliveries to your home. That was really, really weird. Yeah, Rose, you used Netflix, too bad I didn't buy their stock. Yes, me too. If we would have bought their stocks when they initially IPO'd, you'd be a millionaire by now, easily. And so whenever they came out, you know, and they released their DVD service, everybody was laughing at them, especially Blockbuster. And Blockbuster, at I think the early 2000s, they even offered to buy Netflix for like $50 million. And now, you know, Blockbuster is bankrupt, you know. And now Netflix, they dominated the whole space. And what I love about Netflix, and they're very forward thinking, okay, and I'm going to explain to you why. What I love about Netflix, if you have Netflix or if you watch, they have a lot of amazing, in my opinion, original programming, okay? And this wasn't by mistake. This was by design. Yeah, as I just said earlier, Netflix is very forward-thinking. And so Netflix, starting in 2013, if you know House of Cards with Kevin Spacey, House of Cards was the very first original programming made by Netflix. So as you know, when Netflix started, they had a lot of movies, and then later on TV shows that they actually bought licenses from or bought the rights to actually show on Netflix. So, you know, they were taking stuff from other studios, right? But in 2013, they had their own in-house Netflix productions to produce House of Cards. And now, if you've seen, they have all their Marvel shows. They have Netflix-produced movies that are only available on Netflix. All this stuff is only available on Netflix. And Netflix is now really expanding internationally. I watch a lot of international type films, and so if you go to Netflix, you see a lot of Korean type stuff, you know, K-dramas, Korean action movies, just Korean movies from abroad. You see stuff from India. There's a lot of Bollywood type movies, and not even outside of Bollywood as well. And India is a huge, huge market for entertainment. And so I've watched a couple of Indian movies there as well. And then also Chinese movies too. And then there's also some European movies, you know, made by production companies. I mean, even though the company above it is Netflix, the people that they actually hired out there, they're usually a local company. They have local actors and actresses from those countries. And so that is a huge gamble. But at the same time, it's paying off. And on top of it, Netflix is not stopping. If you haven't seen the new trailer, the Will Smith trailer for Bright, go check it out. I'll probably do a review on that later on. But that production cost like $90 million. And so Netflix is spending tons of money on original programming. As a matter of fact, this year, they're spending $6 billion on original programming. And here's where the problem comes in, okay, from an investment point of view. Okay, so right now, Netflix owes about $4.8 billion in debt, primarily because all the investments that they're making into this original programming. And then part of their quarter two earnings was that they actually took a $580 million loss, if I remember correctly, because of all these investments that they're making. So although a lot of people are happy, especially if these investors, some of them are really bullish on Netflix. Just realize that they are bleeding money at the same time, okay, even though their valuation is high. And this is where I go back to why Netflix is a very forward-thinking company. And this is why they're successful. Whenever they came and they started delivering DVDs to people in their homes, they knew something that Blockbuster didn't. Because at that time, Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, they were dominant. People were still going to video stores to rent their movies and games and so forth, you know. So that was still normal. You know, nobody ever got movies at home, right? And so Netflix saw that DVD was a brand new medium, okay? And so people were buying DVD players. And at the same time, they saw where the market was heading. People wanted convenience. And so they started delivering DVDs. And then you remember when they transitioned from DVDs to online streaming, right? And online streaming was not, even though we had it, they didn't do it in the way that Netflix did. Netflix was offering movies through online streaming as a paid service. And now, look at where we're at. Now everybody's offering online streaming. Now Netflix in 2013, they saw another trend, all right? Very smart. They knew that all these big companies, these traditional production companies, Paramount, you know, Time Warner, Sony, right? Well, as more and more people are watching things online, they're watching it in their homes. This was an opportunity for Netflix to not only compete, but also outcompete the big companies and even take more of the profits in the end. Because if you think about how the whole movie industry works, right? There's a lot of money involved, and it's not just the movie. Hey Linux, hey, how's it going? Hello to Hey Linux. And it's not just the movie studios making money, right? There are movie theaters. There are concessions. There's merchandising. There's a lot of things. And the most important thing with all these movies or TV shows, right, is the intellectual property, the rights to the actual piece of entertainment that they have. That's where the real money is. And, you know, Netflix is not dumb. So they saw that, and now they want to own that. And so that's what they started doing. Starting with House of Cards, and then Orange is the New Black, and then all these other shows. And now, if you go on Netflix, you're looking at, whoa, you know, a lot of the programming is now not like from these big studios that they got the rights to show on Netflix and they have to pay them a cut. No, now it's all Netflix. Or most of it is Netflix. But eventually, it's going to be all Netflix original content. So let me answer some questions first before I go further. Okay, Rose is saying Netflix is like Amazon. Yes, Rose, and I'm going to get into that as well, because talking about this whole forward thinking and where the whole industry is heading. However, Amazon is doing some silly things like drone service, want to own their own UPS type service. You know what? I might do a whole episode on Amazon, Rose, because I actually have products on Amazon, and I actually do stuff on Amazon in the back end. I do Amazon ads, I do marketing, and so Amazon is a beast. You know, if you've never done anything I'll just be real. If you don't do stuff business-wise behind the scenes with these companies, it's hard for you to imagine how much stuff that they have, how much power they have. You know, so I do a lot of digital marketing. So I know like how ads are shown on YouTube because I use Google AdWords. I know how your results are shown on Bing because I do Bing ads. I do Facebook ads, and I also do Amazon too. I do Amazon ads and stuff. So if you get into the whole back end of stuff, you realize how powerful these tools are, how much money that they make, and how much data that they make off of you, the consumers. They make tons of money, and they have tons and tons of data on you. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And so I don't know how I got off a tangent there, but it's pretty crazy. Okay, Amazon bleeds money also. Yes, but not really. So Rose said you think AT&T might buy Netflix? Well, I can't remember. I think Amazon, I can't remember which company offered to buy them. There's going to be many companies who are going to offer to buy them, but Netflix is waiting for the long play, really long play. Because if you remember, I just mentioned earlier, if they would have sold to Blockbuster in the early 2000s, Netflix would not be around today because they would have sold them for like $50 million, right? But now their valuation is $80 billion. So think of how smart that was for, I think it's Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Netflix. think of how smart he was not to sell to Blockbuster at that time. And Netflix did not even become profitable, I think, until like 2003, you know. And so, so imagine how much more money that they're going to get later on from all the things that they're doing now if they decide to sell. I mean, I know for sure companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, they will spend billions of dollars to buy Netflix. So who knows what's going to happen? I mean, they might sell in the future. At this point, I don't see it. Okay, they might be bigger than all of these entertainment companies in the future. I could see that. Okay, so let's go back to this right now. So Netflix is spending all this money because they know where the market is heading. First, they knew that DVDs were going to be the future, but really the delivery of DVDs. So then that eliminated Blockbuster. And then they knew that streaming services was going to be the future. So then it transitioned to that. And now, since 2013, they knew that having original content is going to be the future. And 4 years later, guess what? Netflix is not the only one producing original content. Amazon with their Amazon Prime services, Google with YouTube Red, they have their own services, and Apple is going to get in on the game, and I'm pretty sure Microsoft is going to get in the game as well, because there is a lot of money out there to be made. Obviously, if you look at all these movie companies, Disney and all these, they make tons and tons of money, and they want a piece of it. Now, what I really love about what Netflix is doing with their original content is that it's actually really good. You know, it's really good, actually amazing for some of their content. And the reason why is that what Netflix is doing that the other big studios don't, or maybe can't in some cases, is that since they're like basically a startup when it comes to a movie or media company of that size, like these other big ones that I talked about, they don't have to follow the same rules. So they could take a lot more creative risks, right? So that's why when you see stuff on Netflix, to me, it seems more creative. It's not so like cookie cutter, okay? It's not another Transformers 5, which the companies have to constantly pump out because it makes a ton of money, but it sucks, you know? So if you look at Netflix programming, the actual people who are involved, like they'll bring in, they pay them quite a bit of money, but they're allowed more creativity. Okay, so that's the one thing that I absolutely love about Netflix. It's a lot more creative, they take a lot more risks, and Netflix has a lot of data from a lot of different places because they're trying so many different types of entertainment. And so I really think Netflix, not only are they going to be able to quickly cater to the domestic US crowd, they're going to be quickly able to cater to the international crowd. And to be real, the majority of all the money, future money, it's going to be in the international markets. It's not going to be purely in the domestic market, right? Because just look at China. China is huge. Look at India. India is huge. Growing markets such as South America, right? Europe is also huge in some parts as well. And, you know, if you even look at like the Southeast Asian markets, you know, we have Southeast Asia, we have the Philippines. You know, there's a lot of people living there. There's over, what, 100 million people in the Philippines alone. And so there's a lot of large markets out there that haven't been tapped yet. And then when other nations like Africa, right? In Africa, more and more people are getting like internet services there. And so you can imagine like 10 years from now, that's going to be a huge area of growth. And so if you think about it that way, Netflix is poised for more and more success. But these other companies, that's another reason why they're spending $6 billion a year now, because Netflix knows these other companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, they're not stopping. They're going to put a lot of money into that as well. So by the time I think that they catch up to Netflix, Netflix would have already went over to the next wave of stuff. So very smart. And I really root for them to keep getting better because I enjoy their creativity. I enjoy the competition that they're giving. And I really enjoy the Netflix experience more than I do the theatrical experience. I'll just be real with you because their programming is just better. Okay, and so let's go ahead and see what everybody else says. Time Warner is in merger talks with AT&T. Yes, it's still got to go through a lot of the FCC, at least here in the US, but they still have to go through these types of talks even internationally because they deal internationally as well. They have so many subsidiaries and also a lot of relationships with other companies abroad. And so, and obviously in international law, there's different laws. And so that'd be huge, you know, and then we'll have another monopoly. And you should remember, AT&T was a monopoly back then, before they got broken up. It was the Bell companies that got broken up, okay? So Lance is saying we don't need more megacorps, they just end up turning evil. Well, Lance, unfortunately, me, myself, I don't feel that corporations are evil. That's not my thought. You know, it's always the business practices. Because if you look at all of these big companies, Walmart, Google, Apple, they all started small. You have to remember that. They all started with people just trying to make it, you know? So if you look at it at that point of view, they started from the bottom. Pretty much all businesses start small and then they grow big, you know? And so I really feel like if you are able to do that, that is awesome, because you could learn a lot from that. So if you ever start a business, you will go through the same things. And there's not a single person who starts a business that doesn't want their business to grow. There isn't. And so in order for you to grow, you have to serve more people. And obviously, you make more money when you serve more people. So I don't think just being a corporation is bad. I think your business's practices are what you really look at, okay? Because without these businesses, you would not be using YouTube right now at all, because somebody had to create the business, okay? You wouldn't be using your phone because your phone had to be made by a business. And so just to get off of that tangent, let's go ahead and Rose, I think Google should be broken up. Too much influence. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I mean, and if it does, just like what happened with AT&T, it was broken up by Bell. They would just create more businesses. So business is business, okay? If you try to stop business, you're going to basically stop the whole world economy. Everything runs on businesses. You wouldn't have your clothes without businesses. I mean, oh man, I could go on forever about that. All the things that you have, it's all because of business. All the governments, they're there because of business. It's business. If you look at the Forbes list, it's all business owners. It's not politicians, okay? And so businesses are everywhere. They've been around since the beginning, and they'll continue to be around. And so, okay, so, hey, Lynn says, I don't use Netflix. I'd rather watch normal TV. Who watches TV? Because there's nothing good on TV. It's commercials. And they are dying as well. And so, Rose, I support net neutrality. I'm against DRMS on W3C. Yeah, I know you mentioned that earlier. That's a whole nother thing. I haven't spent a lot of time on there. But, you know, Rose, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we don't see. A lot of what we see on the news, by the time it's on the news, it's really not what's going on underneath, you know? And so I can't, it gets into a lot of different areas. But for me, whenever I look at news, you know, you have to do your own research, you know, in my opinion, and make your own, like, decisions on it, you know? And so that's my opinion. So a lot of what's on the news, and I could say this because I see what we're doing on the back end on marketing. A lot of marketing, a lot of what you see on the media, it's planned. Okay, it's planned. And so the reason why a lot of people talk about the same things when they see things on the news is because it was planned that way. Just so if you ever do marketing on the back end, you learn a lot about human psychology. Okay, so a lot of why people talk about the same things, that was by design. And so whenever you see the news, just understand that there is a objective behind it. Okay, there is a marketing, there is a sales, there's always a business reason for doing it, okay? And so just for the simple fact that people are talking about the news, the same news, like for example, in the US, people talk about Donald Trump all the time, right? Well, you could hate or not hate him, it doesn't matter. These news outlets are making billions of dollars every single day. So that is by design. So people are spending all their time focused on that while they're making money in these other areas, okay? And so I didn't want to get off tangent there. So yeah, business practices. I just want to stick to that. So Rose, I can see your point, Geek, but the problem with business, they want to control people. Why did you pick Linux as open source, but I donate using MXS? I'm also Patreon. Yeah, but you know, Rose, I talked about it earlier on the last episode, and I'll say the same thing here. Businesses help people. The more money you make, the more people you serve, the more jobs you can create, the more you can help people, the more you can teach people. That's my thought of it. However, their business practices, you don't have to agree with that. And that's why if you are knowledgeable like you are, you know, a lot of these people who come to this channel, I think they're very smart. I think you are very smart, very knowledgeable. You do your own research. You know, you you can, you know, make your own decisions, you know, and that's my opinion, you know. And so regardless of what's going on, you don't actually have to follow it, you know. It's my opinion, you know, unless you live in a country where you don't have a choice. You know, some countries it's hard for you to make any of your own opinions because the nature of the country. And so let's get into the last point of news. I don't know how Netflix went from that to business, but it usually ends up there these past 2 episodes. I don't know why. So the last thing I want to talk about is the Nintendo Switch online service. They're offering this first go at it, which is their Nintendo chat service, and it'll be available on the App Store and the Google Play Store. And as a matter of fact, I think you could go ahead and download it. I think you can. I think you can download it on July 20th, or maybe now. I haven't checked it on my phone. But it's actually to coincide with the upcoming release of Splatoon 2. And I'm not gonna lie to you, this is, man, Nintendo is so much like Apple, you know, and I'm gonna explain why. Because in order to get this chat service to work, you know, where you could chat with your friends while you're playing Splatoon 2, you have to download the app, okay? You have to have this weird Splatoon or that's not octopus, it's a squid looking adapter which plugs into your Nintendo Switch, plugs into your phone, and then goes into your headset. I'm like, that's absolutely stupid. I'm sorry. That's even worse than Apple's dongle. And on top of it, in order for you to use the chat app, you must have that app on all the time on your phone. So it drains your battery, and when you have that app on, you can't get any other incoming calls and stuff, or you can't run any other programs. Wow, Nintendo, oh man, and so this is like a sign of things to come, because Nintendo in 2018 they will be offering their online paid service, you know. And Nintendo, they have definitely offered online services before, even with their 3DS. But come on, man, compared to like what Sony is doing, what Microsoft is doing, what all the PC companies, PC gamers are doing, they're not only behind, but they're in another planet. I mean, that's just to do chat. I mean, can you think of how complex that is? And normally when we're thinking about the Nintendo systems, we're thinking of ease of use, right? But this is why they're so similar to Apple, okay? Apple, just like Nintendo, controls absolutely everything. That's how they make their money. They're a vertically organized company, you know? And so they offer a lot of their services, but only if it's on Nintendo approved services, platforms, right? Of course, there are third-party manufacturers as well, but Apple and Nintendo, they're very similar that way. They want you to buy only their products. They want you to be only in their ecosystem, and they will charge you crazy amounts. And unfortunately, you have to. So if you think about Apple and Nintendo, think of how many accessories that they sell. Even the very first Nintendo, they had the robot. Yeah, I can't remember his name now. They had the zapper. They had, God, like the pad, the track and field pad, the power pad, they had the power glove, and you could think of Apple too. Zillions of accessories, zillions of adapters. And why do they do that? Because they can make tons of money. And this reminds me so much of the Apple dongles and adapters, right? When they took away the headphone jack, now you have to have a stupid dongle just to use the headphones that you paid money for. And similarly with Nintendo's new chat service, wow, why can't you just do like other people? Just plug in your headset to your game system, done, chat done. But in this case, no. So not only is it more complex, but you're gonna kill your phone. You can't get phone calls, so if you had an emergency, you wouldn't know. And on top of it, you have to have this crazy Frankenstein thing. So yeah, I'm not really feeling that at all. And you know, Nintendo, once again, very, very similar to Apple. They absolutely, you know, they're absolutely like the same in that sense, where people love the brand so much, where they will go ahead and deal with it. You know, and so do I think this is going to work? Well, it doesn't matter because that's about the only way you could do it. And so July 21st is when Splatoon 2 is coming out. So if any of you have a Nintendo Switch, please let me know how that goes, because a lot of people who are already complaining about it, but until it's actually released, we won't know. And so, but you know, it's Nintendo. They have some pretty amazing games. And so that's it for all the 3 topics. Microsoft SQL Server 2017 on Linux. Also had Netflix just dominating with their second quarter earnings. And then with Nintendo Switch chat, or I don't even know what I want to call it, chat. So let's go ahead and go into our bonus round. So first thing is, Rose is saying, Geek, you have a split personality, you like business, but when you're complaining about their business practice. Yes, Rose, I absolutely love business. You could love business, but you don't have to love business practices. Those are 2 different things. It's just like you could love people, but you don't have to love everybody, right? Because not everybody's personality is the same. But you actually have the choice to choose. And so if you don't like someone's business practices, don't use their products or services. But you can learn a lot from how they do their business. For example, Microsoft. I do not like a lot of the way that they have their business practices, right? I don't like Windows. I don't like the way how they're spying on you. I don't like how much they control your operating system. I don't like the fact that they have backdoor access to your systems and that they have the right to give you personal data to not only their business partners, but also to government institutions. Those things I don't like. But what I do like is how they run their business, i.e. just what I talked about a little bit earlier. They knew that they weren't making money in the mobile space, so instead of trying to invest more money into it, they actually offered Microsoft services. Instead of trying to fight Linux in the whole server market, which they are continually losing, offer their cloud services and now offer their database services in Linux. Okay? And so there's a distinction there. Similar to Apple. I don't like their walled garden. I don't like the fact that they charge their customers up the nose and their customers will pay them for it. But what I do like, not their business practices, but their strategy. They are a boss when it comes to their marketing strategy. You want to learn how to market? Look at Apple. There's no better company at brand marketing. And it shows by their market valuation. It shows by the fact that people are willing to spend thousands of dollars that they could be spending on other stuff for a phone and accessories. And so that's what I mean, Rose. Whenever I talk about business, I primarily look at the things that they've done in order to become a successful business and to continually be a successful business, because I myself want to create successful businesses. So if you want to do something that you want to be successful in, look at the people or the companies or the institutions that are successful in it. Okay? So if you wanted to be an amazing singer, right? Who would you learn the most from? Somebody who is unsuccessful in singing or somebody who is world-class at singing? So that's the same way there. But you might not like them as a person. So that's my argument there. So let's go ahead and see if there was any other Linux. I think there was. I don't use Netflix. Okay, that was okay. Let's do a 10-hour video on why Linux is the best. Hey Linux, I actually I think I kind of did that on that last episode. I think that went over like an hour and 20 minutes. I didn't, honestly, when I did that last episode, if you haven't seen it, I'll leave it in the description. But if you haven't seen that last episode that I did, it was actually talking about why, how Linux changed my life. It's pretty much my whole life story as what I remember, why I got into Linux, why I love it. And then the people, Rose was there, I think, oh yeah, there's some other people in there that normally join, and they spent the whole time talking about it. I couldn't believe that we could spend our whole time talking about it, but it's really fun. I love talking about it. Okay, Lance is saying, I would like to see more companies port their products over to Linux. Yeah, Lance, I do too. I mean, I think all of us agree in this case that, you know, if more and more products and services were offered in Linux, more and more of us would pay for it. And then, you know, I hate to keep going back to this, but then that goes to the whole business part of it, you know. If it's not a place where businesses feel like they will get a return on their investment, then they're not going to invest. Okay, just, I mean, from a business point of view, why would you yourself, if you own a business, why would you put money in something that's not going to give you money back? That's kind of stupid, right? But I really feel, Lance, that things are changing. I really do. Why? Because look at how many more services, look how many more programs are available in Linux now. Even like 5 years ago, you know, I never would have thought that I would be able to play modern games on my Linux system. You know, really. I mean, and now with Steam, I'm able to. You know, I never would have thought that I'd be able to video edit on Linux. You know, especially if I remember when Linux first came out, I was like, man, I want to edit here, but and this is even after OpenShot came out. But like, man, I have to use Adobe. I don't have a choice. But then Kdenlive came out. They kept making revisions to OpenShot, you know, and then even things like, really things like OpenOffice at the time. I thought I was going to have to use Microsoft Office forever, you know, so it's things like that. And then more companies, even big companies like Microsoft, right? They are offering services on Linux. So whenever you have more and more businesses, especially big ones with lots of money and influence, when more of them are offering services, you're going to get more and more companies who are going to be involved. So I have a lot of optimism for Linux. We're going to get way more stuff in Linux. Just year after year, we're getting more stuff, and I love it. And so I feel like we will eventually have things like Adobe products. Hey, what's going on, Clayton Coffee? Adobe probably took a bribe from Microsoft. No, I don't think so, Clayton. I just think, once again, it doesn't make business sense for them, at least not right now. Okay, they make a lot of money on the Microsoft platform, they make a lot of money on the Apple platform, and they also offer their online services. If anything, I really feel, I don't think the Adobe online services work on Linux. I don't think so. But I think that'd be their first step. They will offer their services online first. And then, obviously, if you're looking at the data, you can see what operating systems are using your services. And so if they see a lot of people who use their Adobe online services, and then they're looking at their analytics and they're seeing, wow, there's quite a few percentage of people on Linux, then great. Now, it makes sense for us to spend money on Linux. Okay, so I think eventually Adobe will make their software available on Linux because they're going to have to, just like Microsoft had to, just like Apple. Apple knew when Android was not stopping, and just remember, Android is built on a Linux kernel. Even they have to be more involved with open source, and they are involved with open source projects. I just can't remember them now, but even they have to work with open source instead of working against open source. So it's coming, and I can't wait. And so Lance, as desktop Linux gains more market share, I think more companies report. Yeah, definitely, Lance. Definitely. And like I just showed you my example earlier, we could see through analytics what operating systems that you're coming from. So when I'm looking at my analytics, whether it's on YouTube, Google Analytics, Facebook, doesn't matter. Any of the ad platforms that I use, I could see exactly what operating systems that you're using. Okay, or even like the share of mobile versus desktop versus tablets. I could see all of that. And so, and companies, they rely heavily on data analytics, so they know that. And so Rose says, I switched from Windows to Linux because of Windows 10, and I can see more people with switching time. Yeah, I agree, Rose. That's why I enjoy doing these type of things. And then like all the times that we do these videos, you know, I see like more people. You know, every now and then we see new people like Clayton join. And then if you are brand new to Linux, it's awesome because when you come in, you have a community. You know, I say that again, a community, but it's awesome that you could share that, you know. And then as we get more services, like I consider this a service, okay? Having an awesome emulator on there, it's amazing to me, you know, because when this didn't exist before, once again, I felt like, man, I have to use Windows, and I can't do this on Linux, but now I can. And so, so yeah, I'm very hopeful. I can't wait till more and more companies get into Linux and also contribute to Linux, okay? Because as you know, if you are if you're making changes to Linux, you know, you do have to put those changes that you made back into the open source community. That's part of it. That's part of the license. And so that means that's more and more improvements to the whole Linux kernel, to the whole Linux operating system, to the whole Linux community. And I just upgraded my operating system to Linux Mint 18.2 Sonia, and I already updated my kernel anyway. But I will tell you, if you are going to think about upgrading, it's cool to upgrade, but I would also recommend that you look into upgrading your Linux kernel as well. I'm using 4.8. The version 4.13, I think, was just announced a few days ago, and we just had 4.12, the Linux kernel, announced a few weeks ago. And so I think I'm going to be making the move up to 4.10 next, you know, and then after that, I'm going to be going up to the newest version. So the reason why I say that is whenever I updated to Linux, the Linux kernel 4.8, I've been getting better performance on my computer. First it was gaming, and Linux is already fast. Like I said, it's already fast, but I'm like seeing like better performance all around, you know, like a few milliseconds there, here and there. So I just thought that I'd let y'all know that if you are running 18.1, it's cool to upgrade to 18.2, but really, if you are thinking about it, I would upgrade your Linux kernel as well. And so I think that is it. Clayton's Coffee saying BES. Okay, not sure what you mean by that, but yeah. And I did have one other thing. There is a movie, I talked about it earlier in the week, called Valerian. I love The Fifth Element, so I don't know if anybody was like thinking about watching that, because I've heard like really mixed reviews. So if any of you watch that, and because I would like to know what y'all think instead of like other critics and movie reviews. I'm still gonna go watch it myself, but I really love The Fifth Element, and even though the reviews are mixed, visually it just looks amazing. And so I don't know, I was just thinking about Valerian. That looks pretty cool. So Rose says, I like to play Doom 2 in DOSBox. You know, Rose, what I'm gonna do, I am gonna do DOSBox because you mentioned it so many times. It sounds so cool. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I will also, Rose, if you are a Patreon supporter, which you are, I will be making an upcoming video on this whole emulation stuff, but it'll be only available for my Patreon supporters, and so look out for that as well. And Clayton is saying, been using 4.12 for about 2 weeks now. Oh, then that was a typo. Yeah, Clayton, so if you don't mind sharing, what is your experience with it? Has it been pretty good, or thanks for the show, Go? No problem, Lance. No, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, it's almost an hour now on the show. I like to keep these episodes at an hour. And so if you didn't have any other comments, and you know, you could answer that later, Clayton, if you want, on the comments. But once again, I really appreciate everybody who's on here. My regulars, Rose, Lance, Viper29 Gaming, thank you for joining. And Hey Linux, and also new people like Clayton, thank you so much for being on the show. And I always welcome any constructive comments and also any ideas, because this is all about sharing and all about sharing ideas. And I love the fact that we're having actual discussions and debates. You know, it's not always like, oh, I agree or I don't disagree. This is really cool stuff, and we can get into a lot of different topics. And Clay's just saying good, apart from some issues with VirtualBox. Cool. Well, thanks for watching. We will see you on another live episode of Geek Outdoors next week. And, you know, as always, if you did enjoy these videos, leave a like and subscribe. And if you wanted to support my channel further, you could do that at patreon.com/geekoutdoors.